Let's move now to why leadership is an essential ingredient of management. The following quote is from Peter Drucker, who was an American management consultant, educator, and author whose writings contributed to the philosophical and practical foundations of the modern business corporation. Peter Drucker says, "Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things." So let's take a look at why bosses turn people off, or as I like to say, bossy bosses turn people off, and leaders turn people on. Bosses push workers. Bosses manage solely with policies and procedures. Bosses punish, and bosses hold power. Now, bosses, their whole goal is to catch people doing the wrong thing. Or as I said earlier, bossy bosses. It's as though they don't catch people doing the right thing. They use punishment to drive people. In fact, there are even some bosses who require employees to get retrained as part of a punishment rather than to get trained as part of performance improvement and growth opportunity. Leaders, on the other hand, they have vision. They have the end in mind. They have the big picture. They have not just the project that needs to be completed, not just the client that it needs to be completed for, they also have the employee's ability to contribute to that project in mind. Leaders encourage creativity. They're not saying to themselves, my way or the highway, my game, my rules. They're not threatened when an employee brings something in. Instead, they encourage creativity. And if it's a direction that the employee is going that's not the direction of the boss or the goal of the project, leaders have an amazing ability to streamline that creativity back on track and back to the project at hand. Leaders have an amazing ability to communicate. They make it look effortless and easy. In fact, when it comes to communicating, you've probably heard communication works for those who work at it. And realize communication is really, really subtle. We covered a little bit of this earlier when I said use I statements. I need you to hear me. I need you to let me finish. I need you to take responsibility, versus saying, you need to hear me. You need to take responsibility. You need to do this. I mean, just saying you can come across as being accusatory. Leaders have learned that subtle differences in communication, like using I instead of you, when you're asking somebody to change or to do something. Now, where you use you would be when you're complimenting somebody. You are a contributing member to this team. You do have the skills and ability to do the job. You are the best candidate for this position. You notice I am complimenting the person sincerely and intentionally. And that's how you bring that ratio in of 3 to 1. 3 things that somebody's doing right to 1 thing you need them to improve. Communication works for those who work at it. Leaders empower people. They don't micromanage. Now, there may be a time to micromanage early in a project to ensure the project or the task at hand is going to be completed correctly. Leaders, though, have an amazing ability to empower. They equip the person so that that person takes on responsibility. Anytime I hear a supervisor saying, "Oh, I've just got a lousy team. Oh, my team won't do anything. Oh, my team is they just sit there and do the minimal," realize it's the supervisor's responsibility to empower the team. It's the supervisor's responsibility also to motivate the team, and realize that each person who's being motivated needs a different style of motivation. And that's why supervising is not as easy as it looks. Now, there are some supervisors who start thinking to themselves right about now, I don't want to work this hard at supervising. They should just come in and do their job, and it's not my responsibility to, yay, kindergarten graduation them. You're right. It's not your responsibility to do a kindergarten graduation for everybody. It is, though, your responsibility to empower and motivate your team so they want to do the job. And remember that great leaders challenge their employees. So instead of leaving an employee complacent, a great leader will say, you are good at this, you are good at this, and you are good at this. And that's why I'm challenging you to improve on this. Notice I also just demonstrated that like best next time, and those are just some techniques you can use. Demonstrate confidence and integrity. I like to say, are you the same person publicly, privately, and secretly? The public person is the one that everybody sees every day. You've got strangers, you've got acquaintances, this is your public person. The private person, this is who you are with your coworkers and your family and your friends. You know, the private person is the one where they see your good days, your bad days, and maybe sometimes your ugly days. Now the secret person, this is who you and I are when nobody is looking. Is there an alignment? Be a person of integrity. And lastly, encourage ownership. Let's move on. There are 5 sure ways leaders can gain commitment and cooperation. Beginning with fairness. We talked about being fair and consistent. Then moving into being honest. And then be loyal. Remember to include your effective communication and have an understanding. And there are 5 practices of exemplary leadership. Model the way. I had a friend who was a fisherman, and he liked to say, "The fish stinks from the head down." And if you think about that when it comes to supervising people, if the head of the fish is blaming the rest of the body for stinking, it starts at the top. Model the way. What you do will be modeled to your employees. And really, don't we hold people accountable by their actions, not their intentions? And your employees are doing the same thing. They're looking to see, do you keep your word? Do you stay on time? Do you deliver high quality? Do you stay on budget? Do you care about people? They are watching you. Model the way. Inspire a shared vision. Instead of just telling somebody how to do the job, give them the big picture of what the payoff is. Instead of saying, okay, you don't need to know the big picture. You just need to know how to do this, this, and this. Maybe it's installing a new database system. You don't need to know, you just need to know this part. The software's coming here. This is your part of the job. Now, all of those things might be true. The reality is, though, if people can't see the big picture of why we are bringing in a new software program, why we are training in this new software, why we are making these changes, they won't have much project buy-in. And like I said earlier, people will change their ways, including adapting to a new software program, if you let them have their say. So give them the big picture and ask them to be involved in the process. Challenge the process. Make sure, is the process functional? If you've given somebody an assignment and they've been there for at least that 45-day period and they're challenging the process, listen to them. Or maybe you're challenging their process. Enable others to act. Enable others to act. Let them just do it. Realize they're gonna make mistakes, and that's okay, as long as they're legal, moral, ethical, and safe. Enable them to act. Let them just do it. And encourage the heart. I mentioned this earlier. Care about people. They see it. Now, I know there are some supervisors out there who say, not my job to care about them, my job is to see that the work gets done. And there's some truth in that. At the same time, if people know you care, they will go to the ends of the earth for you. Now let's take a look at some advantages of being available and visible to your workers. By being available and visible, you do develop relationships with your employees so you can get to know them better and know what works when you're working with them, as well as what doesn't work. You also learn what goes on outside of your office. There are some managers who just bury themselves in their office or in their workstation and they have no idea what's going on. Remember, as a manager, part of your job is to manage people, and the only way you can do that is by stepping out of your office periodically. The other advantages include spotting problems early on. You can catch things before they go awry. You can catch them and, more importantly, fix them. And it also decreases goofing off. Surprisingly, there are employees who will goof off at work when you're not looking. So it just helps you to be a bit available and visible. Now, moving into developing your natural leadership ability and your ability to spark passion in workers and other managers includes understanding the different personality types. Realize you work with 4 primary different types of styles and different types of personalities. Now, perhaps you've taken some type of a personality quiz. Maybe it was the Myers-Briggs, or perhaps it was DISC, or some type of a communication or personality assessment in how people interact. For this example, we're going to use 4 primary styles, and the first one is going to be the warrior. The second one is going to be the social extrovert or the cheerleader. The third style is the human computer or the analyzer thinker. And then the fourth style is going to be the lamb or the relational person. I'm going to describe some characteristics of each style, and then I'm going to walk you through some suggestions for improvement. Now, warriors, you know, if you're a warrior, if you tend to be bottom line, direct, to the point. Don't waste my time. In fact, time is constantly on your mind. You want things to start on time, end on time, and you hate excuses. You have no problem accomplishing projects. Now, sometimes the details of the project, they can suffer just a little bit on the project. Things about warriors that are great include you do get things done. You are results oriented. Now realize you can recognize a warrior because they are intense. They are ready for battle. And it doesn't matter. I mean, they kind of sound like I'm demonstrating right now. It doesn't matter if they are going out to win over a new client or going in to change the paper in the copier machine. Sometimes they can be a little intense. Sometimes they can be a little bit over the top when it comes to lacking compassion. Some things that warriors can improve include working on projecting compassion. Now, this is not faking compassion. This is actually projecting compassion by slowing down, listening, understanding, and then remind yourself, dial it down a little bit. If you tend to work with somebody who is a warrior, these are good words to add to your vocabulary. I need you to dial it down a little bit. Let's lower the intensity. Okay, hang on a second, hold on. It's only a paper jam in the copier on the scale of life. It's not that big a deal. We can fix this. And so those are some ways that you can communicate with warriors, or if you are a warrior, those are some things that you can do for self-improvement. You can also schedule chat time with workers to get to know them better, just like Steve did with Joe. And he clocked 90 seconds of chat time with Joe was all it took for him to be considerate of his employee. Now notice that is concentrated time. That is not, I'm just giving you lip service, okay, 90 seconds is up, let's move on. This is actually hearing. It might sound something like, hey, Joe, how was your weekend? Joe might say, it was good. It was the last of the fishing season, took the grandkids fishing. Steve might say, did you catch anything? We caught a little one, but the grandkid, had so much fun. And then Steve might go, all right, great. Well, let's move on to the project. What we're doing here is being real and listening. It doesn't take a whole lot of time because you know as well as I do, if somebody's not paying attention, they're gonna go, yeah, okay, you caught a fish, okay, let's move on. Engage. It doesn't take a lot of time. It does take intention, concentration, and effort. Some other things you can do, count to 10 before you go out of your office when you're under heavy pressure. Okay, and this is like, in with the good air, out with the bad air. When you count to 10 though, it slows everything down for you. Because as a warrior, you have no problem dialing it up and being intense. You are ready for battle. Now, if you are working with an employee who gets too intense, again, use the technique from earlier. You might even bring this technique in. Okay, hold on. Let's go in with the good air and then out with the bad air, okay? And then let's take a look at this issue again. Practice active listening. This is listening and speaking and asking for clarification. You're listening to what the other employee has to say. And I like to joke that warriors listen 2 times. Number 1, when it's important to them. And number 2, when they're speaking. All right, I'll say that again. Warriors listen 2 times when it's important to them. So make sure if you're communicating with a warrior, get to the point. Make it important to them. Make it relevant to them. And realize that number 2, warriors listen when they are speaking because that's important to them. And they're oftentimes brief. The best way to communicate with a warrior is be brief, be bright, be gone. Leave them wanting more. Practice smiling. Realize most warriors, if you've ever watched a movie where there are warriors, they're lined up for battle and they look intense, ferocious, and intimidating. That's what a warrior is supposed to do. Practice smiling. And this is not the Jim Carrey, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, in case I don't see you again smile. This is the smiling with my eyes. How can I help you? Practice dialing it down. Also, practice delegating. For some warriors, they think they have to do it all. Delegate. Find the best person for the job and ask yourself, does this have to be perfect? And if not, take the time to train them. Better yet, delegate to someone or something else to train that person. And guard against appearing overly critical with those you lead. Realize warriors tend to look for the worst in situations. Do your best, yes, if you find the worst, to find 3 things that are better, so that way you can tell the person what they're doing right before you tell them how to improve. Let's move on to the cheerleader. Now, I'm going to demonstrate some of the characteristics of each of these styles just so that you can see the different triggers that might be around you where you work. Cheerleaders, they are larger than life sometimes. Now, there are some cheerleaders who are more introverted and more creative internally. Yeah, really, there are a lot of cheerleaders who love recognition. They're larger than life. They come walking into work in the morning and it's like, hey, good morning, how you doing? Oh, you look fabulous today. Have you lost weight? You know, they'll ask these things and some people are like mortified, like, oh, I don't even want you to ask me anything about me. And then some of the people that you work with, they're like, oh, doesn't that person know? This is over the top, this is intrusive, and really no. Cheerleaders have a lot of fun. They're the ones you can, I know you can, even if you can't. Now, there are some dangers of being a cheerleader. Some of those dangers include being overly positive, as I addressed earlier. One of the cautions of being too much of a cheerleader is actually confronting on people on what they need to improve. And so realize cheerleaders make you feel good. If you're a cheerleader, people love being around you. You're probably very popular, and that's nice. At the same time, sometimes it's hard asking people to do the tough jobs or get things done. And some cheerleaders find themselves taking on too much work. So if you are that cheerleader, here are some things you can do. Improve your time management skills. In fact, brush up on your time management skills. If you're thinking to yourself, oh, this project will take me 20 minutes to get done, add an extra 20 minutes because it'll probably take you 40 minutes. If you're finding, oh yeah, I can do this job, you might need to set boundaries with yourself and say, wait a minute, let me look at how my time is being spent right now. Work on your organizational skills. Again, brush up on these. In my mid-30s, I had to hire a professional organizer because I was just not wired that way. And in my mid-30s, one of the techniques that my professional organizer taught me included everything has a place, and there's a place for everything. You don't just put something somewhere because there's room for it. You intentionally place things. I have gone on to say several mantras to myself since that time, including there's freedom in structure. Finish what you've started. It's not, oh, I have to clean my workstation. It's a game called the Where Does It Go game. And everything goes to one of 3 places. You keep it, you toss it, or you file it. Now, I have spent a lot of time putting programs together, including the taking control of time and priorities and organizing your work and life audio. So if you are a cheerleader or if you work with a cheerleader, you may need to delegate to yourself or to them to just listen to that program so they can brush up on their skills. Learn also from those around you who have the ability to have a good eye for detail. Cheerleaders sometimes take on too much and they miss the details. So align them with an analytical human-computer type who has a good eye for detail. Guard yourself against misplaced compassion. Sometimes cheerleaders can be driven by emotion. If you are a supervisor and you find yourself showing favoritism to one person or making lots of exceptions for another person, maybe not writing up somebody who needs to be written up for poor behavior or poor performance, guard yourself against misplaced compassion. Learn how to set goals and when to adjust them. Now, I'm guessing if you're a cheerleader or you work with a cheerleader, adjusting goals is easy for you. You kind of go with the flow or adjust as needed. The challenge for you might be setting goals and finishing what you've started. Some mantras might help you in this area. I keep my word. Keep your word to yourself. If you say you're going to get something done, it's not a matter of I feel like doing it or I don't feel like doing it, where a lot of cheerleaders are motivated by their feelings. Instead, be motivated by your word and realize that other people are watching you. Do you keep your word or are you breaking your word? And then same when you're managing other cheerleaders. Hold them accountable. Here you can use that technique again of the like best next time by saying you are motivating. People do like you. You do have popularity here. The clients love working with you. I need your help to finish what you've started. That's just an example of how you can tie in the things that we've been talking about so far. Avoid addressing workers when upset, because most cheerleaders wear their emotions on their sleeves. And if this is you, you might be a bit heightened when you're upset. Count to 10, dial it down, prepare yourself with the facts and with logic when making your presentations, and then just do it. Let's move now to the human computer. You know you're a human computer if you have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and a backup plan just in case. You can always tell when somebody has gone to your workstation because something is moved out of place. Now realize some human computers are highly organized. Everything has a place, it all lines up, and there's a place for everything. Even the way they think. You know you're a human computer if you were born with a drop-down menu in your head. And you can see what needs to be done, and you're a natural planner. Now there are some messy human computers, yet they have systems in place. They're called clutter piles. And realize clutter is a form of organization. Now, before you start thinking, yeah, I'm organized. Yeah, clutter is called disorganization. On a side note here, if you have the ability to have organized clutter piles, you have the ability to organize those piles into files and systems that you can actually see and use that are not constantly bombarding you every day. I'm going to address more of the systematized human computer who has a place for everything and everything has its place. They strive for perfection. In fact, quality is a driving constraint in their own personal life. They tend to hold themselves to very high standards, and instead of saying, okay, good is good enough, they'll say things like, not good enough, do it again. Now, there are some parts of your job, if you are the human computer, that require perfection. If you are an engineer, if you are designing bridges, if you are putting airbags into a car, there are certain sets of standards that have to be matched when you are doing your job, and you have to have perfection. At the same time, if you're sending out an internal email or a memo, does it really matter if it's a comma, a semicolon, or a dash, or even if it's a run-on sentence? Really, for the most part, in those cases, usually good is good enough. Now, if you're finding yourself saying, I can't even say that, Dawn, all right, you might want to practice that for the next 21 to 30 days. Say to yourself, you know what? Good is good enough here. I don't have to be perfect in everything. Not only will it free you up to focus on what's most important to you, you will have a higher quality of life. And by not holding yourself to such rigid standards, you'll also notice you'll start backing off of some of your employees. because holding everybody else to your intellectual standards will set you up for disappointment, because you are smarter than the average fifth grader. If you work with a human computer, what you may need to do is let them know what is the priority on the project. Is it perfection or completion? We'll cover more of that when we go into the triple constraint threats of every project. Let's move now to the active listening part of being a human computer. Listen. Sometimes human computers shut down because they have given the logical information of why something needs to be done a certain way. And if they're communicating, especially with a warrior or with a cheerleader, sometimes the warrior or the cheerleader will change plans. And the human computer, it's as though they've gone onto overload, does not compute, I'm shutting down, does not compute. Now, they might not literally do that, of course. Internally, though, the human computer can sometimes shut off and think to themselves, I'm not listening. I've brought you the data. I've brought you the facts. This is what you've hired me for. You're not listening to me anyway, so I am shutting down. Realize when you start to shut down, other styles will begin to be more intense with you, and that's going to have an opposing effect. So part of active listening is paraphrasing back what the person said, even if you disagree with them. So you may, let's say boss comes in and says, I need you to stop what you're doing and work on ABC project. Well, you might be in the middle of XYZ project. Part of stopping that is using the technique called the USA technique. This is understand, situation, action. I understand, boss, that this is the priority. So we're paraphrasing back to the boss, you've given me ABC. Here's my situation. I'm working on XYZ. Now, we already determined earlier that bosses like to tell people what to do. They don't like to be told what to do. And so at this point, human computer, ask instead of tell. And it would be, okay, boss, understand, this is the priority. Here's my situation. I'm working on XYZ. And then we would ask, which is the priority? Close your mouth and let the boss answer. Now, if your boss says both, we go back and ask another question. What can I put aside to make time to complete this? And if your boss says nothing and then throws you a compliment, such as, work your magic. Now, if you're a human computer, your boss might not throw that type of a compliment to you. They might throw an analytical compliment to you, and it might sound like this. You're the only person I can depend on to get this done. Everybody else is jumping ship, and you're the only one that I know can complete this. And you might be thinking to yourself, oh, yes, that's what people say to get me to do the job. They tell me I'm smart enough, or they tell me I'm the only one, or they tell me I'm a good time manager, they tell me I'm really organized, or they just say, oh, I know I can leave it with you because you'll get it finished. So if those are some ways that you get complimented as a human computer, if that is you, ask yourself, okay, do I need to be the one completing this? I understand this is important. Here's my situation, which is the priority. If the boss says both, move into the technique that I said earlier about being a solution employee instead of a problem employee. And that might be, I can if I can have 1 hour uninterrupted in the conference room. I can if I can put my phones on hold. I can if you fill in the blank. Use your skills to analyze what motivates people. Instead of trying to understand why people won't do the job, use your skills to analyze what will motivate people to do the job. Get out of your office and go talk to workers. Now, I know for some of you human computers, this is way out of your comfort zone. So some things you can do to help you is a little bit of small talk. Now you might be thinking, what does small talk have to do with my job? A lot. If people think you are a human computer, they will not be motivated to action. Unless you're surrounded with all human computers and that's working for you, you may need to get out of your office and talk to your workers. I promise you, if there are other styles in your office, they will not meet your expectations because a lot of other styles need that human interaction. Take the time to get to know them and to engage them. And then learn how to set goals and deadlines. Now I know if you are the human computer, Setting goals and deadlines is usually pretty easy, and you have a flow chart or a work breakdown structure or a PERT chart or a Gantt chart, and you've got all of these systems to track the goals and deadlines. What you might have, though, is too many systems. So the emphasis here is deadlines. Now, I've been mentioning if you're the human computer. What if you work with a human computer? You might find, whether you're the computer or the person you work with, deadlines can be a challenge. In fact, there are many human computers who would rather miss a deadline rather than be inaccurate or incorrect. You see, that's a motivator for human computers. They want to be right. And so if it means missing the timeline, they'd rather look guilty of missing the timeline rather than giving the wrong information. So you may need to set deadlines and be accountable for them. This is very important if a job outside of you has a deadline. Let's say something needs to be picked up and delivered to a company absolutely positively overnight by tomorrow. Sometimes people focus on making it perfect instead of meeting the deadline. And so the goal would be, okay, time is most important here. We've got to figure out how much time we have to complete this. What's the deadline so we can make sure we get what needs to be completed, done, and in the box, and to the client or wherever it needs to go by tomorrow at whatever time it needs to be there. Attempt to make decisions on a timely basis. When you are making your decisions, do it now. One of the reasons a lot of highly smart or intelligent people, human computers, have clutter piles is because they refuse to make a decision. Make your decision now instead of putting it off for later. Because what happens when you make it now, you move on and you get into the habit of finishing what you've started. Now let's talk about the lambs. You know you're a lamb if you're a really good listener. You know you're a lamb if people will even come and tell you things. And you know you're a lamb if they tell you things like, I don't know why I'm telling you this. I've never told this to anyone. And right now you're thinking to yourself, yes, that happens to me all the time. Usually it's because you're compassionate. You care about people. You make exceptions to the rules. Now, these are all really, really important characteristics of any human being. There are some cautions, though. When you are too nice, sometimes people will take advantage of you. And they know you'll clean up the mess. And so be careful if you tend to be too nice to employees, make too many exceptions. Now, you might not be the lamb, you might work with a lamb. Here are some things that you need to do. You might need to tell them, I need you to finish this by such and such a time, and be specific. You might need to prepare them. You might tell them there's an employee here who could take advantage of you because you're being too nice. So you can put it on to me, you can say. Tell them your boss said this needs to be done this way. Those are some ways you can help lambs take risks. If you are the lamb, practice these techniques. Practice taking risks. Practice using the fact, impact, respect, request technique. Practice using the USA, understand, situation, action technique. Practice these risks. Balance compassion with logic. Even though a person might be asking you for something, for example, maybe Petunia's coming in and saying, oh, I'm sorry I was late, the bus was late, or I'm sorry I didn't get this done, please, can you help me with this? Oh gosh, I can't work that schedule. Can you switch with somebody else, or can you do it for me? Balance your compassion with logic. If some of these expressions that I just used are things or expressions that people use with you, realize they're recognizing this characteristic in you. Now, if you work with a lamb and you're finding yourself using these expressions with that person, you may need to balance compassion with logic. If you're the person who's the lamb, say, all right, I understand. Getting to work on time can sometimes be hard. Or, okay, I understand. Being late is something that happens in life sometimes, or I understand. There are schedules that I don't want to work sometimes. You notice I have validated the person. So we've used that understanding statement or part of the USA technique when responding to a person who's trying to take advantage of your good nature. Remind them, though, the goal of the project is, or the goal of the task is, or the client is expecting this, or the job requires this. So you are balancing your compassion with logic. And you notice I said, yep, I hear you, yep, I understand you, and then I pointed them immediately to here's the logic. Notice I left the word but out of this part of our conversation. When we say but after a statement we've just given, what does it do? Yep, it negates the previous sentence. As I like to give you a visual here to help you remember, but in conversation builds walls and builds bridges. So for example, oh, I understand your situation, but please play again. Or that's a really good idea, but again, it's just not going to work. Versus, I understand your situation and here's my situation. Or that's a really good idea and I was thinking about this. Notice it bridges the conversation and keeps things rolling. So balance your compassion with your logic and then learn to set goals and deadlines and hold people accountable to those. Watch those around you who are assertive and learn from them. Learn from people who have the ability to set boundaries. Now you realize you might need to change your tone and tempo. You may need to say, gosh, my schedule's really full, not able to help you with that. Now they might push and say, oh, come on, please. You might need to firm up your tone. I said, my schedule is really full and I'm not able to do that. All you do here is put on a bit of a stern voice. You're still being nice, you're still being respectful, you're just matching and mirroring the other person. And then rethink your logic and your emotion behind your decision. Take what we've talked about during this section and ask yourself, what are some things I can change to better communicate with other people and also to be more respected in my job? Let's wrap up this section by developing and mentoring employees and talking about how to do just that. What's the point? What's the payoff of developing your employees and actually mentoring them? First and foremost, it reduces the cost of learning. There are many studies out there that show for every employee that you train or develop and mentor, it would cost you 4 times as much to replace that employee. So if it costs you, let's just say $100 to train somebody in becoming better at a certain aspect of their job or developing and mentoring them, it would cost you up to $400 in time, effort, money to replace that person. It also improves employee retention. It improves productivity. It links the employee's knowledge to the job. It creates relationships. Really, use your assertive communication here. Assertive communication is communication that focuses on problems and solutions, not people and personalities. While people and personalities are important, remember, we've got to focus on what is the issue or the problem and what is the solution. And the only time you're tying in personalities is to match and mirror that style so you can accomplish your goals and objectives. In this session, you've learned what makes a boss and what makes a true leader. In addition, you looked at what are the essential ingredients of good leadership. In this next session, you will learn about indispensable management skills you will use every day.